Week 1 is in the books, but it's not too late to get closer to the game you love with DraftKings 1 Week Fantasy Football. This Sunday, DraftKings is hosting a free contest with $100,000 in total prizes to celebrate the launch of their new game. Pick 'em. Just use code REPLAY to play in DraftKings free contest with $100,000 in total guaranteed prizes this Sunday. It's free. Why wouldn't you try? DraftKings.com code REPLAY. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Back and better than ever, Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. All right, here's the deal. Roughly 3 weeks ago, the Cleveland Indians were 13 games over 500, and they had a run differential of plus 118. In the roughly 3 weeks that have ensued, the Indians are 20 games over 500 with a run differential of plus 102. It is one of the greatest stretches of baseball the game has ever seen. And Golic is basking in the glow. He's trying to change record books. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, there's a lot going on.
Sequestered himself in a room with Hembo, and I don't know what you two of you have cooked up over there.
There's a lot cooked up here, but the bottom line is the Indians are 20 wins. They tie the 0-2 A's with their 20 straight wins. Next on the list for them is going to be the 1935 Chicago Cubs, who have won 21. They have won 21 games in a row. And I'll be honest, Greeny, I'll just say it right now. I'm not acknowledging the 1916 New York Giants 26-game winning streak.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Golic, I don't know what happened, but for the moment I've gotten here, he and Hembo have locked themselves in like a little room, and he is trying to dismiss the 1916 Giants.
Can I just say, after my argument, you will agree with me.
Okay, so I look forward to that.
Okay.
I think that right now the Indians' biggest problem is not the 1916 Giants, it's the 2016 Cubs who beat them in 7 games in the World Series. That's the one you need to get over. The last time the Indians lost a game, which was August 23rd, McGregor and Mayweather had not fought yet. Not a single college football game had been played. Kyrie Irving was still on the Cavaliers. That feels like 4 teams ago.
You know what I would like to know if I were there and those close to the team, there have got to be some incredible superstitions would be the wrong thing, but guys doing the exact same thing. I mean, no. Baseball lends itself because of the number of games to superstitions, to doing the exact. This has to be ridiculous what's going on right now with some of the players and what they're doing.
Well, settle in because you're going to hear Terry Francona talking about just that in just a moment. But let's start with off the top. And again, it starts, of course, with the Indians, who beat the Tigers 2-0. Their win streak is now 20 games and counting.
Yeah, really impressive. 7th team in baseball history and 4th team in the modern era to win at least 20 games in a row, joining the 1916 Giants, who I will discredit very soon, 1935 Cubs, 2002 A's as well. And here's the deal. So Corey Kluber pitched last night. It was another shutout, this time 2-zip. They shut out the Detroit Tigers 2 times, 2 games in a row now, 7 shutouts during this 20-game streak. It's been amazing. And here's what you do, is you start looking at, they have 17 games left?
Yeah.
People are wondering about a 37-game winning streak because they only face one pitcher who has an ERA below 4. That's it. And that person has only had 4 starts. So they're not facing any great pitchers. They're not going to win 7. They're not going to win 37 in a row. But that's always the fun stuff to bring up. But they are on a tear right now, and they are 1 away from the legitimate record of the 1935 Chicago Cubs.
Boy, there's a lot of buildup to this discrediting of the 16
Oh, and you're
Giants.
going to agree. You will say a win streak. You will agree with me.
I'm looking forward to
Off
it.
the top.
Let's see what you got after this. The Dodgers beat the Giants 5-3. So hallelujah, the Dodgers finally won a game. They have the best record in baseball, and they had the longest losing streak of the season. It came to an end last night.
Kershaw pitched well. Remember his last outing, he got drubbed in just over 3 innings, so he pitched well here. 6 innings, gave up just 1 earned while striking out 6. The Dodgers also clinched a playoff spot for the 5th straight season, extending the longest streak in franchise history, and it was Kershaw who did it. So that 11-game losing streak is snapped, the longest losing streak since the franchise record 16-game losing streak in 1944.
Off the top.
All right, Johnson & Johnson is usually something we associate with the Jets. Now we can attach it instead to the Arizona Cardinals. Down goes David Johnson as he's going to go on IR with the wrist, and so the Cardinals re-sign Chris Johnson.
Oh, I mean, remember, this guy came into the league. He was in the league 10 years, ran that 4.240 in the combine, was fast. First 6 years in Tennessee, 09, rushed for over 2,000 yards, had the league, by storm with what he was doing. And then he went to the Jets for a year.
I remember it well.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, he doesn't. And then he went to Arizona where he was later in the season. He broke his fibula, so he went on IR, comes back the next year. And then there's the emergence of David Johnson, who is going to have the surgery and may be back. They can put him on IR, but he can come back. They're looking maybe between Thanksgiving and Christmas for him to come back. We'll see with Chris Johnson, who was basically the last cut this year, and the last cuts that went on. He was basically the last player cut before the Cardinals started the season.
And finally, the Lakers announced they will retire Kobe Bryant's jersey twice, one time, which is to say they will retire both of his jerseys, the number 8 that he wore for 10 years and the number 24 that he wore for 10 years. They'll do both of those on December 18th.
He'll be the only player with 2 jerseys retired. He made the switch following the 2005-2006 season, and basically the numbers are almost identical. 10 years in one, 10 years in the other, 10 All-Star selections at number 24, 8 at number 8, 7 All-NBAs at number 24, 4 with number 8. But as far as points and assists, they're almost right on to one another with each jersey. So both jerseys going to the rafters.
And that is what everyone's talking about, which is brought to you by Dave & Buster's. Watch the games and play the games at your football headquarters, Dave & Buster's. All right, you've got my attention. I am dying to hear it. How are you going to discount the longest win streak in baseball history, which belongs to the 1916 New York Giants?
Yes, it really doesn't. And with apologies to these guys and their families, with apologies to the likes of Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stanford.
Wait, hold on a second. They had 2 Heines?
2 Heines. 2 guys, their name was Henry, but they were Heine. Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford.
They had a guy named Heine Zimmerman?
Heine and Heine Stafford. And also Ralph Stroud, who was Sailor Stroud.
They had Sailor Stroud?
Yep. George Kelly, who was High Pockets Kelly.
High Pockets Kelly? That sounds like a guy in a mobster movie.
Yeah, it does. William Parrott, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but Paul Parrott, and Harry, is it Sally, Sallee, Slim Sally.
So they had Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Paul Parrott, and Slim Sally.
There you go.
Is that why you're discounting them, just because they had goofy names?
I'm saying with apologies to them and their families of what I'm about to do. They are on record, longest winning streak in modern era.
Yeah.
1916 New York Giants, 26 in a row.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So when you think 26 in a winning streak, what do you think? In those 26 games, what did they do?
They won 26 games.
In a row, right?
Yeah, of course.
Point of order. Point of parliamentary procedure.
Parliamentary, but go ahead.
Whatever.
Yeah.
A point. This team, they won 12 in a row. They tied.
Oh.
And then they won 14 in a row. That is not a win streak. That is a 26-game unbeaten streak. Not a win streak. So not only should they not have the 26-game win streak as a record, their win streak shouldn't be even near the top. It should be in the record books today. 12-game winning streak and a 14-game winning streak. And if you want to say a 26-game unbeaten streak, okay, I'm fine with that. But it is not, I repeat, it is not a 26-game winning streak.
Well, actually, you happen to be 1,000% right.
I am.
And now that you've told me what this is, they've put it up on my screen. On September 18th, they tied the second game of a doubleheader. The game was called after the top of the ninth inning with a score of 1-1, presumably due to darkness. So, which is funny, the fact that they're presuming that. But
why didn't they just turn the lights on?
Remember. You're so funny. Okay, here's the point, though.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. One, wouldn't that make it a 27-game unbeaten streak? Right, the tie would be
a game. So yes,
would include that.
Yes.
So it would be, but it absolutely isn't
not
a winning
a 26-game winning streak.
No, it's not.
12 games tie, 14 games. It is not a 26-game winning streak. And, they called the game in the 19th. Whatever the reason, did it count or did it not
hold on
count?
now. The Elias Sports Bureau is disagreeing with you. They say it is the longest winning streak. It's the record for most consecutive wins because a tie game breaks neither a winning streak or a losing streak.
They're wrong. They're wrong. If you tie, there's no win and it's not a loss. So you go to unbeaten. You don't say win. It is not a win streak. They tied. That broke the 12-game win streak. They tied. And then they had another 14-game win streak. So overall, it's a 27-game unbeaten streak.
All right, I'm begging you to stop doing that. But here is the one thing I would ask.
Yeah.
Did they make up that game? Did it ended in a tie? They left it that way.
Hembo? Did they leave it that way?
They leave it that way.
All right, so we got to get Steve Hurt on from the Elias Sports Bureau, and I think we got to go toe to toe with him.
While you get Steve Hurt on, I'm going to get Golick's hammer because this is going to be solved.
You are bigger than Steve.
Yeah,
he is, and you know Steve obviously well for years from Elias Sports Bureau. He was in the booth and all the Monday night games and everything else. We've known Steve for years, and he's the man behind the curtain at the Elias Sports Bureau.
I don't want to hear the tie.
I would like to have this conversation with Steve.
It's got to do something. It's got to mean something. They didn't win 26 consecutive games.
I actually agree with you.
Thank you.
It is a 27-game unbeaten streak, but it is not a 26-game win streak.
And within the 27-game unbeaten streak, they had a 12-game winning streak and a 14-game winning streak.
Now, it might change my perspective if that game ended in a if there was a tie there that they then finished later in the season or something like that. But that game ends as a tie. So it is not a win.
No, it's not.
It is not a win.
Not a win, not a loss.
So if that came in the middle of 26 games that they had lost, I would call it a 27-game winless streak, but not a 27-game losing streak.
No, it's exactly
I actually think you're right.
I am. No, that's not actually. I am right.
Well, Elias says you're not.
Well, Elias is wrong. Elias, look at me right now, Elias. You're wrong. Okay? My Indians are one away from the true win streak, the 1935 Chicago Cubs.
This is actually worth talking about.
You're darn right it is.
I will send a note to Steve. He just sent me a note the other day about something entirely different.
Oh, you have his number?
I have his email.
Note. I'll call him.
Okay, I don't know if I have his number.
I want to call him.
Let me see if his number shows up on his signature line. Let's see here. Yes, I have his number.
All right, Steve. And Steve, you better come correct, my friend. Don't give me this. A tie isn't a win. It isn't a loss. It's just to feel good. No. It's not a win, not a loss.
I mean, now you're disparaging Steve Hurt, who did nothing here.
Listen, is he part of that statement that was written?
I don't know that. I mean, he owns the Elias Sports Bureau, so I suppose he is
him.
Then, yeah.
That's him. He
is Elias. He personally wrote that?
That note is from him.
That
is his quote.
Is specifically from Steve.
From Steve.
All right, I'll read it again.
Ridiculous, Steve.
It is the longest winning streak. It is the record for most consecutive wins because a tie game breaks neither a winning streak or a losing streak because it always gets replayed unless the season ends first. So now what we have to get to the bottom of was in 1916, it came on September 18th. That would have been the very end of the season. Would they have completed that game if the season didn't end? And does that factor in?
If they completed that game and they won it, then it would be a 27-game win streak.
That's correct. You're right, Mike. I have to say, I hate to say this because
Steve, I quite honestly don't think you're up to the task of running Elias.
No.
All right, I question your credentials.
The Giants apparently had 3 ties that year. Okay, this actually is an interesting little side note. Far more interesting than I expected it to be. I will give you that.
I'm not just some dumb jock here.
Well, yeah, you are. But, I mean, I think that in this particular case, you might have a reasonable point. And the Bickler has your hammer. Bickler, go ahead, bring it on up. Bring up the ceremonial Golick's hammer. Once again, in conjunction with our understanding of the meaning of the term Occam's razor, we have developed Golick's hammer, which is the principle by which, in any dispute between two people, see Hurt, Steve, Golick, Mike, at the end of the day, the bigger, stronger one wins.
Steve? That's all I have to say, man.
He banged his hammer. So we will get Steve on the phone. I've got his cell here, so we'll call Steve, and we'll get to the bottom of this, because I actually think it is worth pursuing.
Oh, it is.
Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance, and Steve Hurt will join us later, we hope, on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line, if we can find a place for him, because Lord knows we're packed.
Oh, no. Listen, I'll bump anybody to get Steve on. Gruden, gone. Herbie, gone. Herm, no, Herm's not gone.
We got Gruden, Herbie, Field Yates. We'll
Gone.
bump Field Yates.
Gone.
We'll bench press Field Yates. We'll just
you know what? You know what I wonder, though, quite honestly?
Yeah.
Will Steve come on?
No, Steve will come on.
Will Steve come on and face the music of the truth that dispels his statement?
The hilarious part of this is that you are friends with Steve Hurt. You just don't remember who he is.
No, I don't.
You know Steve, and you like Steve.
There are plenty of friends I don't like. Okay? There are plenty of my friends that I can't stand. Okay?
Golick is losing friendships over the 1916 New York Giants, who once
Couple
again
of Heine's.
featured such legends as Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Pole Parrott, and Slim Sally. So let it be written.
So let it be done.
Okay, let's get back to this win streak, though, and let's go at the mics, which is brought to you by Dove Men Plus Care. Did you know that 91% of guys that use Dove Men Plus Care antiperspirant recommend it? So if you're heading to the gym right now, why not pick some up on the way? Here's Tim Kirchin on this win streak. He says it may be the greatest of all time.
They've outscored their opponents by 102 runs.
That's pretty good.
20 games. Only 6 teams have a better run differential for the season than the Indians have for the last 20 games. It has been unbelievable. The last team to have a run differential like this over any 20-game period was the 1939 Yankees, one of the greatest teams of all time, and the team that holds the greatest run differential for a season, plus 411. That's the company that the Indians are in right now, and it is just breathtaking to watch. This almost by definition has to be the greatest winning streak that any of us have ever seen.
Let me add another number to that. During this streak, they have allowed 32 total runs.
20 games.
And they've hit 39 home runs.
My goodness.
I mean, it really is, all kidding aside, and we're having fun with this, even though the Giants' record will be discounted. It really is an incredible streak that's going on.
You know, here's the one thing The 0-2 A's also won 20 straight games, and that's the American League record, and so now the Indians have tied it, and they could break it. They have an afternoon game today. The thing I'd be interested in is, A, what was their run differential? Do you happen to have that, the A's run differential?
The A's was...
Hembo's pointing at you, saying you have it.
Okay, I don't see it.
Plus 76.
76.
It's 76.
So it's not as good as 102, obviously, but my question is, does that matter? I mean, the objective is to win a game. So obviously the dominance, would that make the win streak, would you separate the win streaks based on run differential? They won their games more easily.
More dominating.
Dominatingly.
Because
Timmy just said it is almost by definition the best win streak we've seen. Well, we all saw 2002.
Yeah, we did.
The two of us were sitting right here in 2000. Well, in a different building, but we were doing the same thing in 2002. So what makes this streak better than that?
A's actually scored about half a run more per game in that streak. Way less run differential. Indians had a better ERA, 160 to 265 in that one. But, yeah, I mean, not only you look at how you're beating teams, but if you're destroying teams, and that would be run differential, that has to go into the equation. You know, you're winning 3-2 or you're winning 11-0. You know, there's something to just winning, and there's something to just destroying your team. There was another.
If you are doing that, then I would say it is the best winning streak that I've seen. That's the most dominant stretch of baseball that I've seen.
One thing they're doing well is they're jumping on teams, and this has a lot to do with it. They've outscored their opponents 64-12 in the first 3 innings during the streak. So they are just jumping on teams.
Now, forgive me if you said this already. I've looked at some of the stats on this. I haven't looked as much as I normally would. How much have they trailed in these 20 games? I mean,
I don't have that.
4 innings.
A total of 4 innings. That's unbelievable. They've trailed for 4 innings since August 23rd. That is really remarkable. So the Indians are red hot. You brought up the issue of superstitions.
Without that sport lends itself more to that, and I would imagine in this, man, guys are doing a lot of the same stuff.
Here's Terry Francona.
I got one really good buddy, one of my best friends, but he's notoriously bad luck. Everybody kind of refers to him as like the gray cloud. He knows who he is, and you talk about superstitions. I will not talk to him. He is a text only. Oh yeah, he knows. Cost me one job. He's not getting away again.
He's so funny.
I'm not a guy of superstitions and doing that.
But you mock me for them.
But I would listen. maybe one of the reasons is as far as a win streak is concerned. I mean, I did a lot of the same things when I got ready, but I didn't have to. It was just kind of my routine, which I guess would be the same thing. But I never had a long winning streak, and I have to imagine if I'm the 07 Patriots and I'm winning, I'm 2-0, I'm 6-0, I'm 9-0, I'm 12-0, whatever, that at some point I may start doing the exact same things.
We did that in my family, and all we were was fans. The one year the Jets made it to the AFC Championship game, we ate in the same restaurant every single night. I ordered the same food because it was working. And then A.J. Dewey happened, and that was the end of that. Okay, so we will get Steve Hurt on the phone, which I'm really looking forward to. A, because he has the best voice of anyone you'll ever hear. B, because I'd like to actually, I will mediate this. I will be Harold Henderson.
All screaming aside and having fun aside, I think it is a point.
That's what I'm saying. I think you have a legitimate point. I do believe that there should be three different delineations. There should be win streaks.
Right.
There should be unbeaten streaks.
Right.
Well, and I guess that's only two. So, and then eventually you lose. So they should separate the win streak from the unbeaten streak.
Right.
I understand they have an unbeaten streak, but I do believe that the winning streak is interrupted by a tie. I actually agree with you. I'm looking forward to talking to Steve.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Golic is also in the midst of a dispute now with the Elias Sports Bureau, and it is an interesting one. And we've got a call into Steve Hurt, and we'll get him on here, and we've known Steve for years. And the Elias Sports Bureau recognizes the 1916 New York Giants as having a 26-game win streak, even though they had a game in the middle there that was called when it was tied.
Yeah,
it didn't end in a tie. That's an important distinction.
It was a tie at 9 innings, and they called it because of darkness. They had 3 ties that year, and none of those ties were put into their record. So basically, I disagree with how they went about this. They have their reasoning because the Giants won 12 in a row, they tied, and then they won 14 in a row. They did not, in my opinion, have a 26-game win streak because they tied that game. Elias is saying they didn't recognize the ties. They discounted them. They didn't put their 3 ties, including that one, in their record. So basically, it wasn't a less than 5-inning game, and it went 9 innings. It got called for darkness, and they basically acted like it didn't happen. That's their argument. I disagree with that. They played a 9-inning game. It was a tie. I know you don't discount it, but they played it. They played that game. They do not have a 26-game win streak.
One of the interesting things that I'd be curious to know is also, do the stats from that game count? Like, Honus Wagner played in that game. If he had a home run in that game or whatever it is he did in that game, did it count toward his season statistics? It's something that we'll get to because so rarely does Golic have a beef like this that actually makes sense.
It does.
But we will get to the bottom of that as we continue. Meanwhile, let's get the football conversation started again. Kirk Herbstreit on the way in this hour. And right now it's time for Jon Gruden. And when the Saints first signed him, it seemed like an odd fit. Mike and I talked about it at the time. And watching that game, and I fully believe both he and Sean Payton when they say that there was no real sideline blow-up between them. But that doesn't change the fact that he does feel a little bit like a square peg in a round hole. What role do you envision Adrian Peterson playing in that New Orleans offense as the season goes on?
I think he's going to be a closer. I think he's going to be a guy they lean on late in games. I think they're going to lean on him in short yardage, perhaps goal line. And I think they're going to lean on him on some early downs, first down, 2nd and 1 to 3, to slam it up in there and set up some play-action passes. But, if you watch the game, the Saints are missing their starting left tackle. That's significant. They lose their starting right tackle. Max Unger, their center, he missed just about the entire preseason. And the Vikings are pretty good. So, without getting all teary-eyed here, there's a lot to be written yet in the Adrian Peterson file in New Orleans, but he's going to have to get used to sharing the load with 2 other pretty good backs.
So along those lines, before, when you're talking about signing him, how much, putting on the coaching cap here, how much does Sean Payton need to have a discussion with him, a guy that's used to being the man, to now be part of a scheme? What is that discussion like?
Well, I'm sure Sean had extensive discussions with him. That's how it goes during these free agent visits. I'm sure he told him that ball distribution is part of the program here. I mean, we have a great quarterback that's thrown for 5,000 yards 5 times and we're not going to hand the ball off every play. We're going to keep Drew Brees at the forefront of the quarterback position. So I'm sure they were pretty obvious, and they laid things out. I don't think they counted on losing both their starting offensive tackles before the first game of the year, but that's football.
Mike and John Gruden, and on the other side, what a performance from Sam Bradford, who has been, I mean, I hate to say this, but sort of a dink and dunk kind of quarterback with extremely short passes. The numbers would back that up, and he was flinging it down the field on Monday. What did you see that was different in the scheme from Minnesota, and what do you think that suggests that their season may look like with Bradford getting off to that start?
You know, I got excited studying Bradford prior to the game. I thought he played incredible football last year. I know the sports statistical world has a lot of his passes going 10 yards or less, but Bradford got pummeled last year. He really did. They replaced all 5 starting linemen for a reason. Khalil's gone. T.J. Clemens is gone. Alex Boone got cut. Brandon Fusco is gone. They couldn't pass protect, and this man got punished a year ago and still threw 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, almost 4,000 yards, and broke an NFL record for completion percentage. And he had his offensive coordinator resign in week 7, and he just got there a week before the season. So Bradford can play. When was the last time he was in a premier situation? You know, he was drafted by the Rams. That was a bad team. He was a young quarterback. Then he went to Philadelphia and played in a no-huddle, never-seen-before offense. Then he gets traded the week before the season. I think what you're seeing, make a long story short, is Sam Bradford finally in a destination where they've got a pretty good offensive line, an incredibly talented young back, some emerging receivers, and one hell of a defense.
So let's go there for a moment, because I highlighted that offensive line yesterday, and you just mentioned, again, 5 new starters. First, I'd like to know if you've ever seen that in your career coaching, where next year you come in with 5 brand-new starters on the O-line. They were dead last year in rushing. I love the outside zone scheme with the speed of Dalvin Cook. So first, from that standpoint of just meshing 5 new guys together from the previous year.
No, I've never seen that. We never did that in the preseason game. I mean, that's unbelievable. And when you look at the Vikings play their 4 preseason games, these 5 starters that you saw play on Monday night had 0 reps together. There were bits and pieces where they played one at a time or 3 or 4 at a time, but they hadn't played one collective snap together until Monday night. Credit Tony Sperano, the line coach. Riley Reif, he moved over from right tackle to left tackle where he played in Detroit last year. And Mike Remmers, and you have to give them an incredible amount of credit. The rookie center to boot.
Mike and John Gruden, I hope I didn't just lose the phone there. Did we just lose John?
I'm here.
Okay, good. Thank you. John Gruden is with us there. I thought the phone died for just a brief second. Let's look ahead to your game. This coming week will be the Lions and the Giants. And I want to lump both the Giants and the Seahawks into this question, John. I asked it to several people yesterday. I mean, their offensive lines looked just awful in week 1. The Giants, who we sort of knew that was going to be a problem coming into the season, it manifested itself in every way that it possibly could Sunday night against the Cowboys. And similarly, I thought for Seattle in Green Bay. Is that something that can get better as the season goes on without changing personnel? What do you, let's look specifically at the Giants because that's who you have this coming Monday. What can they do to make that offensive line more effective as they go through their season? Because right now it looks like an Achilles heel they couldn't overcome.
Oh, that's a complex question. I've always thought that the up-tempo, no-huddle operation that they like to use with Eli Manning is tough on an offensive lineman. I mean, put yourself in Eric Flowers' shoes. You're a left tackle. You go to the line of scrimmage. You never know who to block. You don't know what the play is because Eli Manning is going through all these dummy snap counts and code words to try to decipher what play to get to, and then, boom, 6 seconds before the ball is snapped, you get the play, and then you got to get a call, and then you got to get a block, and it's one play after another. It's hard. And remember, there's a lot of line play right now that's not very good. I trace that back to training camp. Watch the Bengals play. You said Seattle. Some of these teams have a lot of new players. The Lions have a new left tackle. They've got a new right tackle. They've got a lot of new parts. It's going to take time, and we don't practice hard and we don't put the pads on very often. Good luck.
And speaking of new players, Deshaun Watson, all signs point toward him very likely getting the start tomorrow. How do you go about that with a rookie quarterback? He goes in for the second half of the game last week, short week of preparation, and then you may be going with a rookie quarterback.
Oh, you might have to talk them into starting after watching their offensive line play last week. I mean, they gave up 11 sacks. Calais Campbell had 4. You might not want to show them the film from last week. That was a horrific start, but man, Cincinnati needs this game. They're coming off a bad performance, and they've got a pretty good front. I just think you got to really simplify the game plan, have a pretty solid protection plan, and put some bootlegs and some no-huddle things in where Deshaun is completely comfortable, because this is a tough order going against the Bengals on a short week. Both teams not feeling good about themselves.
Take us back to your experience with him at the quarterback camp and everything else, and all of your preparation for him leading up to the draft. You know, for those who don't remember, and it feels like so long ago already, you know, your thoughts on him, your expectations for him coming in, because one of the many things that I remember everyone saying was he's the most ready because of the experience he had in college. He's the most ready to start playing immediately.
Well, he does have a lot of playing experience, Mike, but he hasn't been in and out of a huddle. He hasn't really run a diverse scheme, meaning they don't change personnel often. They don't have a lot of sophisticated snap counts and audibles. So I'm sure Bill O'Brien, who comes from New England in a really incredibly sophisticated world of offense, is trying to make the transition, teach him what he wants him to do, and at the same time, he's going to have to perhaps do some things that Deshaun is already comfortable doing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some no-huddle offense Thursday night.
John, because there's only 16 games, there can be a lot of overreaction each and every week. And going back to the Thursday game, which seems like about a year ago, should there be some in New England, losing at home, a place they're so used to winning, and being beaten the way they did in the fourth quarter? Any kind of lasting effects from that in your mind?
Certainly. You know, I think Bill Belichick said a couple of years ago, and I agree, the first 3 or 4 games of the regular season are an extension of the preseason. When you played, Mike, when I coached several years ago, our players actually had 2-a-day practices, pads, and played quite a bit in the preseason. When you look at a lot of these teams, many of these players didn't play more than 35 or 40 snaps the entire preseason. So they really don't know what's coming out of the bag, these coaches. They really don't know what's going to show up. And a lot of these teams have no continuity, and New England's one of those teams. There's a lot of new players playing key roles that really haven't done that as Patriots. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit of time before we see exactly where they go.
Mike and Mike, John Gruden with us again. Lions-Giants is the Monday night game this week. Lions had a really interesting game this past week against Arizona where they turned Carson Palmer over repeatedly, and then Matt Stafford did what Matt Stafford does, which is throw a bunch of touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win the game. As you're looking over the tape of that game, what are you seeing from Detroit?
Well, they hang in there. It's a credit to Coach Caldwell. They didn't play real well in the first quarter. They fell behind, heard some boos, but you said it. Matt Stafford, he doesn't get enough credit for his scrambling ability, his ability to push the ball down the field from all kinds of different platforms, people underneath his feet. He's got to reset. He's got to make some difficult throws. He does it without any running game. I have not seen the Lions have a good running game in a long time, but they leaned on their quarterback. And their defense is better than people think up front. They can rush the passer, and they have a very opportunistic secondary. I like Glover Quinn a lot at the free safety position, and they've added DJ Hayden, the ex-Oakland Raider, and they get Quandre Diggs back to play the nickel corner. And with Darius Slay, that's a formidable outfit. I can't wait to see the Lions secondary go up against the Giants. I just hope Odell Beckham plays.
It's the Lions and the Giants in New Jersey. We'll see if Odell is there. We know John and company will for Monday Night Football. Thank you, John. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
John Gruden with us every Wednesday on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. I share that feeling with John. Regardless of what team you root for, I want to see Odell Beckham on the field. He's the most exciting player in the National Football League, and it would be nice to see him in the nationally televised spot and just in general. And I think they will look. How different will their offensive line look? How different will their whole offense look because he's on the field?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on the play call. You can hit him deep on plays where you got to block a little longer, or you can hit him with a slant and he goes 80 yards where you're getting rid of the ball quick. I get what John's point was about the O-line in their scheme, where Eli is trying to get a read on the defense of what he has before he calls the play, and then, as he said, you got 6 seconds to determine who you're going to block him and block him. The other side of that, I'll say, it's pro football. I mean, if you can't do that, then you can't play. I mean, there are a lot
of every team doing
not every team is doing that. But then I would say on the other side, if your offensive line is struggling and that's a reason, then you damn well better change it. Then as a coach, you better get out of that and say, you know what, I like running this, but if I don't have the personnel that can do it, then I can't do it. And that's a decision Ben McAdoo has to make and has to decide. But there are they're not the only team where an O-lineman has to make a quick few-second decision on who I'm blocking, what the scheme is, and what I have to do. You got to do it. That's your job. You have to decipher who you have to block, and you got to block them. I mean, that's part of being a pro is knowing what your responsibility is. And if the responsibility is too much in that case for linemen, then as I said, it's incumbent on the coach to get them out of that.
And they're playing a defense that's better than people think. If you watch the Lions play defense this past week, they had a defensive touchdown. They should have had two. Haloti Ngata had a ball right in his hands that it would have run back for a touchdown. It would have been another defensive touchdown. What did they intercept Carson Palmer 3 times?
I believe 3, yes.
So their defense is pretty good. And Matt Stafford, if you watch that game, and you emerge from it still thinking Matthew Stafford is not worthy of every penny they pay him, that I don't know what you're watching. I don't even know what you're talking about. That guy is the whole offense. They don't have Calvin Johnson anymore. They don't even try. They don't even pretend they're going to run the ball. He just stands back there and flings it. And in the fourth quarter, when they wear teams down a little bit, he's just phenomenal. And I know that he makes some mistakes, and people will always say, well, they're always coming from behind because they're always losing. Because I get it. But at the end of the day, they win because he makes big plays late in games every single week.
They're never out of it, and that's what you have to recognize when you're facing them. Even if you get a lead on them, you know that they're captain comebacks.
All right, we still have a lot on this game that didn't count. We've got people defending Elias. We've got people defending Golic. Golic's hammer is being questioned this morning.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
So much good college football stuff going on. Let's jump right into it here with Kirk Herbstreit, his regular weekly visit with us. College Game Day will be in Louisville for number 3 Clemson and 14 Louisville, and another great performance or great start to the season by Lamar Jackson. Yeah. Mike was just breaking it down for you on ESPN2. Good morning, Kirk Herbstreit.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Great. I want to start with the game that you guys had on Saturday night, which was fascinating, Ohio State and Oklahoma, and I was extraordinarily surprised. At halftime, I was positive Ohio State was going to win that game because Oklahoma so thoroughly dominated the first half and just couldn't nothing on the scoreboard reflected it. And then the second half happened and Baker Mayfield happened. How would you describe that performance by the quarterback, by the team, and what do you think that sets up for Oklahoma potentially for the rest of this year?
Well, first, I think you have to recognize the job that Lincoln Riley and Mike Stoops with the defense, just the preparation that Oklahoma had. I don't know if it was the loss to Ohio State a year ago. They had won 10 straight. There was a lot of build-up during the week about Baker Mayfield referring to Ohio State beating them in Norman. And I don't know if you guys have watched Baker Mayfield closely in the last 3 years, but it's not like, wow, who's this Baker Mayfield? That's kind of who he is. He's incredibly competitive, kind of a chippy guy. It's just how he plays the game. And so I wasn't necessarily surprised by his performance, but I was really surprised by the youth around him and the way they played with such maturity. And they were, like I said, they were just so well prepared. There wasn't anything that surprised them. And so it really paid off. They probably could have won by even a larger margin if you think about the first half and, going for it on fourth down a couple times and that type of thing. But they dominated the game. They deserve all the credit. Lincoln Riley is both a head coach and a play caller, had his team ready to go. And Mike Stoops, this is a guy that maybe 10 years ago was known as one of the deans of the defensive side of the ball. And for whatever reason, Oklahoma's just kind of gotten away from being that dominating defense in recent years. And it's the best they have looked at the corner spots and just with the kind of the aggressive attitude for 4 quarters. It's the best they've looked in years. And now the question for me with Oklahoma is clearly by their emotions after the game, they wanted to win this game pretty badly. Can they maintain that energy? In the past, Oklahoma was a peak and valley, a peak and a valley type of team. They need to be consistent. That can't be their season beating Ohio State. It needs to be one hurdle of 12 or 13 or 14 games. So I want to see how they react to winning a game like that. And if they play with that kind of energy the rest of the year, man, it's going to be hard for anybody to beat that team.
Staying with that game on the other side with Ohio State, and I don't want to act like I'm just saying it now. I've been saying it for the last couple of years. J.T. Barrett has not done a lot to impress me as a passer. He never really has. And right. Ohio State has never been in a position where they have to pass themselves back into games. But if that's the case, Herbie, unfortunately, I don't think they have a whole lot of other options. But that does seem to be an Achilles heel for this team. How do you see that going forward?
Well, there's talk about should they sit him and play one of the younger guys. And to me, at this point, I wouldn't go there if I were Urban Meyer. If you go back to 2014 when he was a freshman and replaced Braxton Miller, he had 10 days when Braxton Miller went down with an injury, and it's like, okay, we're going to go with you. You're number 16. You're starting. 10 days to get ready for their first game. And by the end of the year, I think he ended up finishing 5th in the Heisman Trophy race that year. And he was running and throwing. To me, the difference was what was around him. You had Zeke Elliott as a younger player who was still a very dominant player in the backfield. You had Devin Smith, who was I think he still plays with the Jets, but he's a guy that could get vertical and get behind defenses that were loading up against that running game. You had Michael Thomas, who plays for the Saints, who's another guy that could hit a quick slant and go 80 yards. So they had big playability within their passing game to make defenses have to respect that aspect of their game. They've not had that in 15, 16, and now 2 games into 17. They don't have that. And so until they prove not just that J.T. Barrett can throw, but they have receivers that can make you pay for crowding a line, until they prove that, they're going to face the same style of defense week in and week out. Now, some teams won't be gifted enough athletically to hold up, but when they face teams with equal or better talent, they're going to be in a quandary until they prove that they can do this. And to me, I'd expect them against Army this week, UNLV, Rutgers, teams with lesser talent. They're going to go back to just Urban Meyer football. Roll up their sleeves, pound the rock, get physical, set up play action off of that to avoid what, Mike, you alluded to when they're in obvious passing situations. The real test will come when Penn State comes to town. Then you'll find out how much they've actually improved.
Mike and Herbie, College Game Day this week. Another monster game again, as I mentioned, Louisville and Clemson. So here's Lamar Jackson's chance with the huge spotlight against the huge opponent. Give us your sense of what we expect there. And Jackson, as I mentioned, with the performances that he's had so far, has put himself right in the middle of another Heisman conversation.
Well, not just this year, it's just how that game ended last year and the implications of that game. I mean, that game was built up very similar to the way it is now. And that game came down to the final drive. And if you remember that one of the Louisville receivers on a 4th down play with about a minute to go in the game, they're driving, they're inside the red zone. He catches the ball near the sideline. Instead of cutting back inside to fight for a first down to get inside maybe the 5-yard line, he cuts outside and ends up a yard short, goes out of bounds. And so to me, this almost feels like that the next quarter. It's like we're going to the fifth quarter because that game was so good last year. And you have so many of the pieces back with Lamar Jackson, won the Heisman. He's got some playmakers around him that can really make big plays. And then the Clemson defense. They're as athletic and as strong as any defense you'll see in college football. And Brent Venables, I would argue the last 3 years, has probably been the best defensive coordinator in the game. And so to see Brent Venables' defense against Lamar Jackson, I mean, that's what everybody is going to be watching to see and going to the stadium to see. And last time I got excited to go up to a Louisville game, it was the same week, it was to watch Florida State. And Florida State went up to Louisville with a very athletic defense, and they looked like a bunch of fifth graders running around trying to stop Lamar Jackson. He's the most electrifying quarterback with the ball in his hand since Michael Vick when he was at Virginia Tech. And if you do not corral him, if you do not have leverage on the football, he's going to make people miss and make them look silly. So Clemson did a pretty good job of it a year ago at home, but it's a different game on the road. So how that defense plays and how they prevent him from making a big play, if they can do that, that'll probably dictate the flow of the game.
A game that was going on the same time as yours. I was there in South Bend as Georgia came up there and brought a nice contingent of fans with them. And I think, as I talked about after that game, their speed on defense really showed, and certainly the rushing attack on offense to get the 1-point win over Notre Dame. I know there were some issues with Brian Kelly and dealing with a reporter after that game, but on the field, how do you assess both these teams as Georgia goes on, obviously, to play that SEC schedule? So obviously Tennessee and Florida, Auburn on the schedule, and Notre Dame still obviously with Stanford and USC and Miami on their schedule on where these teams are.
As you know, it's still early in the season to kind of definitively know where we are with all these teams. For Georgia to go on the road and win that kind of game, you talk about a boost to morale with a young quarterback like that to go on the road. And I know his numbers weren't off the charts, but he didn't lose the game in that environment. You can rally around that, and I really like the kid's skill set at quarterback. He can throw it. I think he can keep plays alive with his legs when he needs to. So I like the feel of Georgia, and of course they have the two backs in the backfield. It's going to get a lot tougher for them. Once they get into conference play, and you went down to some of their schedule and who they have to play still. But with an athletic defense and with the SEC East being wide open, Georgia with that quarterback right now, they're definitely right in the mix. And I have to say, to me, the favorite with the way Florida has looked so far offensively. With Notre Dame, let's see how they respond to this. Their defense was so bad a year ago. The fact that they're playing and they're running to the ball and playing with a little bit of an attitude, I think Mike Elko deserves a lot of credit coming over from Wake to get them to be playing with a little bit of chippiness to them. I like Brandon Wimbush. I'd love to see a little bit more big play ability in that backfield. Josh Adams is a physical guy, but if they could find somebody to complement him in that backfield, because much like what you were saying about Ohio State, I really feel like with Wimbush, if they can run the ball, they're going to get into their rhythm, and it's going to make it easier to throw. So we'll see how they respond after the year they had last year at 4-8. Let's see how they respond to a home loss by a point.
He is Herbie, and again, his top four after week 2. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Oklahoma. Number 3, Clemson. And number 4, USC. We'll see if there's a shake-up there with Clemson and Louisville this weekend, and College Game Day will be there. Herbie, every week with us here on Mike and Mike. Thank you. See you next week, Herbie.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Kirk Herbstreit every Wednesday right here on Mike and Mike. I'm really looking forward to that. If you remember that game last year, he mentioned 2 Louisville games last year that I remember. The Florida State game was unbelievable.
Yes, it was.
And I had picked Florida State to win the national title, so that went really badly for me there. And then that game against Clemson, which... college football is so good that it's kind of hard to say it was the best game of the year, but it was right there. It was awful close.
Right there, without question.
So we'll see what he can do. And look, everybody knows there's only been one guy ever to win the Heisman twice in his life, but Jackson has a really good chance at that. Right now, do you know who the favorite is? You see, I got this sent to me yesterday. Do you know who
I did. I can't believe I just who is it?
The favorite is Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield.
After that performance of the other night, and Lamar Jackson is second. We shall see.
The best of Mike and Mike.
So much that we have working today. But I need to just take 1 second here.
Okay.
There are certain things people have the ability to do that just astound me.
Mm-hmm.
Just astound me. The genius that is the human being.
Okay.
So there are so many things I can't do, right? I mean, the
Wow.
list of things I can't do is long.
It's easier to go to the list of things you can do.
But if there's one thing I wish I could do, is to figure out how to do this, okay? I'm about to do something. This is real. What you are about to hear is real, okay? I am about to talk into my phone, and you are going to hear it. Siri, who owns Ohio Stadium?
It's Baker Mayfield.
How do they do that? Who did that, and how do they do it? How many people have an iPhone? 26 billion? I mean, how many people are there on planet Earth? Subtract 9, everyone else has an iPhone. Somehow someone figured out how to make Siri say that. I want to know how to do that. How do you do that?
It's a great point. I'm with you.
That's a great skill.
That really is. I have
We
no
need
idea.
to look into that. If anyone knows how to do, I want to be able to
What's
make
that technology?
Yeah, seriously.
We didn't learn it yesterday. Was it yesterday, the announcement of the new iPhone coming out that's going to be like $20,000 or something like
Yes,
that?
I don't
It's
know.
not going
to be that much, but
like $1,000.
yes, I saw a lot of people talking about it like crazy. But the point is, how do you do that?
I would have been more interested to hear the answer to that question than to hear about the
I
new
understand
bells
how
and
people
whistles.
get into Wikipedia and change things in there, quickly, to reflect stuff like that.
How do they do it so it's on all our phones? Which, by the way, is a scary thought.
How do you make Siri do that? I have no connection to that game, to those schools, to those people. They would not have linked it to me in any conceivable way. It just works. It's incredible. Siri, who owns Ohio Stadium?
Here's what I found.
Okay, never mind. It picked up the just works, but it's still working.
And you're going to need a new phone after that.
And now I need to enact my Apple protection or whatever that thing is, where they went in and they just gave me a new phone. It was great. But anyway, the point is, how do you make Siri
I don't
do
know.
that?
I'm with you. I would like to know that as well, and that technology.
That's the greatest skill ever. Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call it, click today. Find out if you could save. Mike, I wanted to just finish up because your passion on this subject is, I think it comes through the television screen and comes through the radio speaker. Again, the 30 for 30 aired last night about the replacement players.
Right.
And Golick was one of those players on strike in 1987. And what doomed your union was the fact that the biggest stars in the sport crossed the picket line.
Crossed the picket line. We all walked, we all marched, we all thought we were in solidarity, and very quickly it eroded to the point where by the last replacement game, there were 21 Dallas Cowboys that had crossed the picket line and were playing in that game. After I was at the Houston Oilers then, and I was very pro-union acting during that. That's when I got released. I was starting nose tackle before that strike, and I was very union guy during that strike. And the Oilers, after that strike was over, they expanded the roster so that you could add as many people as you wanted. The Oilers kept every single replacement player, and they were on the practice field with us. Like the Washington Redskins, I think, signed 13 of those guys. You want to talk about fights and being uncomfortable, and all of a sudden I was not only not playing, I was inactive. I went from starting to not playing and inactive. I mean, you think something might have been going on there to where I asked Jerry Glanville, I said, listen, if this is what's going on, just release me. Be careful what you ask for. They did, and that's how I ended up in Philadelphia. But, yeah, it made me mad as a guy who was making $3,400 per game for a 16-game schedule that I had to hear the guys, complain, oh, I can't miss my $31,000 check or my $60,000 check, as most of us who weren't making anywhere near that were staying out there and striking for the cause, which unfortunately just absolutely disintegrated right before our eyes, and obviously the major cause of that. I'm not saying we would have won that fight anyway, but when your top players start crossing the line, you are absolutely done.
The opposite end of that is baseball, where the players did win, and they routinely won because they did stay together. I covered spring training the year that they had replacement players in. Major League Baseball had all these replacement players in there in spring training. And it was actually a judge who was now on the Supreme Court of the United States, Sonia Sotomayor, who ruled in favor of the players and ended that strike, or who knows what would have happened. Right. But they had all these other guys in there in spring training, and I was down there covering it. And the Major League players, the guys who were replacement players who wound up because what the owners did was they twisted the arms of a lot of guys who were in AAA and made them show up. They never let them in the union. When they would have their union meetings, they would lock these guys out the door. So they stayed together. And there are a variety of reasons for that, including guaranteed contracts and longer careers and everything else. But at the end of the day, you want to win a fight like that, you have to stick together.
Well, and really quickly, just to end this, in '87, it was about free agency.
Right.
And we didn't win it then. We actually took it off the table. We got free agency in 1993, and before that, we decertified. We got free agency by not being a union. That's how we had the power to get it, by decertifying as a union, getting free agency, and the league actually, as part of the stipulations of it, wanted us to get a union again going forward because they knew they basically could beat us most of the time when we were unionized. We decertified, and that's one of the big reasons we got free agency.
So you've got that. Now, if you go to the other side of it, we have the current, because most football fans don't care about that anymore.
Right.
Although the 30 for 30 I heard was really good.
It was more. I'm not, as far as the 30 for 30, I didn't explain really yet. It was more on the side of the replacement players. The quarterback for the Redskins, Ed Rupert, he was one of the first replacement players. After the first day he left, he felt horrible about crossing the picket line. He left, but then they didn't have a quarterback, and he went back. I mean, it was stories more about those guys than anything else. It was very interesting, but it certainly brought up the other side of memories for me.
But for the current issue, we have so many people who look at the current collective bargaining agreement and think that the players did a terrible job and they lost and everything else, and they blame T. Smith and whatever the case may be. Here's the bottom line. All right, so because Booger was in here for you one day, and he was saying a lot of that. And then Jeff Saturday came in, and that was not to rebut him. It was Jeff's day, and he was in here. Now, Jeff was I don't think he was the president of the Players Association then, because Dominique was, but Jeff was a very high-ranking member of the Players Union and was involved in all those negotiations. And one of the things he said to Booger was, dude, what you have to realize is my phone was blowing up every single day during that lockout with players saying, man, you got to get me back on the field. I don't care what happens, get me back on the field. I don't care what happens, I'm not missing game checks, get me back on the field. So the football players aren't going to have it. They're not going to sit. No. They're not going to lose those paychecks. And you know who knows that? The owners.
The owners, absolutely.
And so they have no chance.
Yeah.
So whenever anyone blames the leadership of the union for the deal they currently have, I always say, listen, you're just pointing in the wrong direction. They're fighting an unwinnable fight.
And understand, the players have won some things. Listen, that 93, when we fought in 93, the benefits package greatly improved. Without question, from what and that was the year I retired, so I didn't get any of that, but guys going forward did. And this last one, the players, they wanted the offseason to start later in April. They wanted no two-a-days in camp. They got it. They wanted less padded practices, and they got that. So the whole major fight is we keep talking about Roger Goodell and his power in Article 46. I'm telling you, players are not going to miss a game check for that. They're not. But that's what's going to create the headlines, because that's the headlines we have. Player gets in trouble, league gives discipline, union appeals, goes back to the league, union doesn't like that, takes him to court. That's everywhere. But that's not going to be the battle. It's not going to be the battle. The players have gotten some of the things they have wanted, but ultimately, if you're talking about digging heels in, the owners, ultimately, if it's on the same topic, normally the owners are going to win that one.
Absolutely. So, all these people who say that when you're fighting a fight you cannot win, it's very difficult to expect better results, in my opinion, than what they got. That's just one person's opinion, and I have no horse in the race. A bunch of Twitter reaction on this. NY Raider tweets, when the big money players crossed, did that cause friction in the locker room with the other players?
Well, sure it did. I mean, you talk about in Dallas. Look what happened soon after. So after the strike in 87, look what happened to that team. Tony Dorsett asked for a trade that next year. He wanted out, and by 89, not long after, who was the owner? It was Jerry Jones. No more Tom Landry, no more Tex Schramm. I mean, they were gone, and that whole thing.
And they were institutions. For those of you not old enough to remember, they were institutions in Dallas and in the National Football League.
But yes, there was. I mean, are you kidding me? Listen, we struck. It got contentious, and after the strike, as I said in Houston, they kept every single replacement player. You don't think there was bad blood there? You don't think there were fights that went on there? So in every team, and I don't know each team how many they kept. Like I said in the show last night, you saw Washington signed 13 guys. And they said it wasn't great in the locker room. How could you expect it to be? These guys crossed a picket line and continued to play, and they did it for their reason. I'm not going to sit there and bang on every one of those guys. They did it for their reasons. They interviewed a bunch of different guys for their reasons of doing it. I'm not here to judge them about it. But at the time, I know when I'm looking in that locker room and I see a guy that crossed that picket line to be a replacement player, I wanted to punch him. I wanted to get in a fight. That's what we all wanted to do, and it happened out on the field. I mean, it was not a pretty thing for a while, no doubt about it.
All right, Mike and Mike, all this Twitter that we're getting here through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Nothing makes up for your football obsession like a surprise from 1-800-Flowers.com. To order a dozen multicolored roses, plus an extra bouquet and a vase for just $29.99, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. Okay, little quick foray back to my days in journalism school.
Okay.
One of the things that they teach you in journalism school is headline writing, which as I think is more important than ever now, because back in the day, headline writing was meant to make you want to read a story in a newspaper. But generally speaking, I don't know exactly how they calculated this back then, and it's not really the important part of this. You already had the newspaper. You had already bought the newspaper. Now these things are measured in clicks, so I think the headline is even more important than it's ever been. In what I do for a living, we've used it in teasing and trying to get people to listen.
Right, and just for fact, I didn't go to journalism school. I had always thought when I saw an article and a headline that the person who wrote the article also wrote the headline, and I found out that is
not true. No, editors at newspapers write the headlines. I don't know how that works on online sites. But either way, the point of this is there was a great headline in a story today that jumped out at me immediately, and that is Coach Marries Player. Now, obviously, you can't have a coach marrying a player.
No, you cannot.
Then, regardless of the sport, regardless of the circumstances, you cannot have a coach marrying one of his or her players. It just does not work that way. Except, in this case, it's perfectly fine. At Murray State, defensive lineman Bishop Woods and his fiancée Caitlin Myers, who welcomed their first child 4 months ago, were tired of waiting to exchange I-do's. So he told Myers Tuesday morning that he found someone who could marry them. And it happened to be his offensive line coach, Brian Hamilton. Woods found out that Hamilton was an ordained minister, and Hamilton conducted a ceremony Tuesday at midfield of their stadium right after practice. The coach said, "It's the life of a college football coach. You get to be a part of kids' lives. It was fantastic for me to share that."
That's very cool.
So this couple wants to get married right after practice. The offensive line coach, who is an ordained minister, marries his player and his player's fiancée at midfield right after practice.
Very cool. Don't see many weddings where the one person is so sweaty, like I'm sure the groom was in this case after practice.
I mean, that's the one where would you now kiss the bride, and the bride says, "No, not right now."
Yeah, we'll wait on that.
There's another one here, another headline, by the way, that I like. How about this? How is it possible that the greatest game ever was never played? The greatest game ever was never played.
Okay.
You have any guess on what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
You know who's playing each other this weekend? USC and Texas.
Ah.
Are you aware that USC is 4-0 all-time against Texas?
Wait, Greeny, how could that be? Didn't they have a championship game where Texas beat USC?
No, they didn't. At least not according to the NCAA and according to USC. USC and Texas play this week for the first time since their memorable BCS title game in the Rose Bowl following the 2005 season. But per the Trojans' official game notes, they list the Trojans as 4-0 all-time against Texas, while acknowledging one loss in that Rose Bowl was vacated due to NCAA penalty. That is because, as their SID explained, the program was instructed in 2010 by the then NCAA Director of Statistics not to include participation in any games that year as part of its official records. Mm-hmm. So they not only vacate the wins, they vacate the loss.
Yeah.
So as far as USC is concerned, that game, which many people think is the greatest game in college football history, never happened.
Well, I think that's good news for me and my family. Now we don't have to say we lost to Alabama.
Correct.
In the 2012 because all that was vacated, was it not?
The whole season was vacated.
Appeal that. Yeah,
none of their wins count. Their appearance in that game doesn't count, and thus the loss.
Can I give you another headline?
Sure.
That is tricky and isn't really true, yet we have the headline.
Go ahead.
That headline would be 1916 New York Giants have the record for the longest winning streak in baseball. No, they don't.
This is a really good battle that we have going on today. And have we heard back from Steve yet?
He's coming on.
Okay, he's coming on what time?
Oh, good. He didn't
9:05.
Okay, so at the top of the next hour, we'll have Steve Hurt on, who runs the Elias Sports Bureau and is a great guy. And the position of the Elias Sports Bureau is the 1916 New York Giants, who won 26 consecutive games.
Right.
But sandwiched in the middle, they had a game that went 9 innings.
Right.
Got called as a tie.
Right.
The game thus ends as a tie. As far as we can tell, the statistics count, but the tie is not counted in the standings. They do not consider that tie breaking up the win streak. So while Golic is arguing it should be an unbeaten streak,
right,
Elias actually counts it as a winning streak.
And I disagree with that.
26 consecutive
Those
games.
Giants, led by a couple of guys named Heine Zimmerman and Heine Stafford, to go along with a Sailor Stroud, a High Pockets Kelly, a Pole Parrott, and a Slim Sally. With all apologies to them, they won 12 in a row, they tied, and then they won 14 in a row. So that is a 27-game unbeaten streak. And now they did have 3 ties that year, and Hembo, you're saying those 3 ties were not put into their record.
Correct. They played 155 games, but only 152 games are reflected in the standings.
Okay, so that would seem to give them a feather on their side, a check on their side of the argument. Here's where they're going to lose me. And if you're coming on here, Mr. Hurts, and telling me that, okay, they didn't count what?
Hurt.
Go
ahead.
Well, he's going to hurt.
It's not Jalen Hurts. It's
whatever.
Steve Hurts.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Steve. Steve, if you're going to come on, the only way I'm going to give this some slight bit of credence is if you tell me those 3 ties, you didn't count the statistics for the players. If you did, then your argument is garbage as far as I am concerned. You can't not count it in the standings, but count it for the player. So if you counted the stats for the player, your argument to me is null and void. I will Golic hammer you, and I will win that argument. Even if you say they didn't count, I'm still teetering on the battle that I'm going to have with you, Steve.
Yeah, so once again, we invoke the provisions of the Golic's Hammer, which, again, is a subsidiary of Occam's Razor.
Right.
Occam's Razor dictates that in any scenario where there are multiple explanations for a phenomenon, the likeliest one is usually true.
Mm-hmm.
Golic's Hammer is a similar principle, wherein in any dispute between 2 people that goes on for a prolonged period of time, in the end, the one who is bigger and stronger wins. And thus, Golic's Hammer.
So if Steve and I continue to disagree, I'm bigger than Steve.
You are. Steve's a pretty big guy.
No,
but
I understand
you're bigger.
that, but I'm bigger, so I will eventually win this. But that, to me, is going to be the big thing here. If you didn't want to count the ties in the record, okay. But if you counted the player statistics, you lose me. It's done. Then the Indians, to me, are 1 game away from tying the true best win streak, and that would be the 1935 Chicago Cubs at 121 games.
Yeah, that's for those of you who are wondering why does Golic care about this, because the Indians' 20-game win streak is 6 games shy of the officially acknowledged record. Golic is arguing they should be able to tie the record with their afternoon game today,
right,
and break it in their next game if they should win this, because Golic is arguing the record should be 21. Elias recognizes the record as 26. We'll see where that all winds up going. You want to sneak in a quick next question here, or we'll save it. We'll save it.
Let me do one thing here to just from a factual standpoint. You had mentioned we were talking about CBA. If Dominic Foxworth was the president of the CBA at that time, Kevin Mawai was the president of the CBA. Jeff Saturday and Neek were on the executive committee. Just to be...
yes, I have that too. Dominic sent me that email too here. Sorry, Jeff and I were executive committee members.
Right.
The president was Kevin Mawai.
Right.
I'm glad that we corrected that, but it's not...
No, but we just wanted to get...
Right, but in this case, Jeff was certainly in on all those conversations, and he was the one who told us here on the air, guys are calling him up every single day. He was getting tons of phone calls from guys.
I don't want to miss
Look,
checks.
I don't care what happens. I'm not missing checks. And if that is the approach you're going to take, and I'm not criticizing those players, but you're fighting for things that will never, or most of them will never impact you. How many players who were in the league then are still in the league now? Jeff Saturday is sitting here doing football with us. Dominic Foxworth is sitting here doing football with us. Kevin Mawai's not playing anymore. You're fighting for things that are largely not going to impact you.
And here's one of the other differences, though, I will say in baseball and football about, baseball, baseball had guaranteed contracts. Yeah. There's a difference in that.
Of course. And they have much longer careers.
Right. So I'm talking as far as holding out to get what you want. Yeah, your contract is guaranteed.
And there are a variety of reasons.
Right.
The players have it better in baseball. I mean, in every way you can imagine.
Yeah, when you know that money you have is guaranteed, and in football you may be cut the next day and not making a dime, there's a huge difference in that.
Yes, and when the average length of your career is 3 years, and you know that, you're not missing out on one of them because that becomes 33% of all the money you're ever going to make in your life playing that sport. All right, so people are telling me, because Andrea made a little video of my playing the thing from Siri, that they take that from Wikipedia, but I can't find it on Wikipedia. I don't see it on Wikipedia. So all the people who are telling me it's Wikipedia, again, and by the way, Herman Edwards is with us here. Good morning, Herman.
Good morning.
You want to?
Yeah, I know you're excited about that.
You're going to enjoy
this. It really is.
Okay,
I give it to you with a toy here.
I'm going to do this for you again here. So this is just me talking to a phone. Siri, who owns Ohio Stadium?
Checking out Ohio State.
Oh, see, now they've changed it.
Oh!
The time that I said it, they changed it. Look what I've done.
Who changed it? But who changed it?
I don't know, but it worked when we just did it 20 minutes ago.
Changed it?
How do they know how to change it?
Siri's boyfriend changed it.
Siri's a boyfriend? I mean,
you didn't know that?
No.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Oh, come on.
We're just learning all kind of
You
things.
didn't know
here,
that?
aren't
Come
we?
on.
This is a very different kind of day. All right, Mike and Mike, Herman Edwards is here. Let's get down to business. A bunch of different things I want to get into with you today. And let's start with, you're a head coach. You play week one. You had a lot of questions going into week one about your offensive line. And the answers, as you're watching the film from your week one game, come back in the negative in every conceivable way. Let's say, for example, you're the coach of the New York Giants.
Yes.
What do you do? What do you do when your offensive line is struggling?
Well, you have to bring more guys in to protect. You can't be this quick passing offense that you would like to be, in the fact that they can't hold up. Now, who was your competition? Obviously, that has a lot to do with it too. You know, who did you play? But I think going into this, you're probably going to have to use the backs a little bit more in protection, maybe even the tight end. Problem with the Giants too is that without Odell Beckham, when you line up, you have no one that tilts the field as far as the defense. So when you talk about the Cowboys, a couple things. First of all, the Giants didn't have enough plays. The Cowboys had the ball for almost 35 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so now you feel like every time you go out there, because you don't have a series of plays, you're almost compelled to say, come on, guys, we got to go, because they're keeping the ball away from us. And so when you get into that, as well as there's no one that scares them when they break the huddle as far as the defense of the Dallas Cowboys, because Odell Beckham's not out there. So the field doesn't get tilted.
So barring injuries or anything like that, when you were a head coach, you had expectations of your team going into a season. And then after week one, again, barring injuries, losing anybody, did you ever finish week one and go, oh, boy, okay, I didn't see that problem?
Well, going into week one, I think a lot of teams don't know who they are, to be quite honest. With the way games are being played in the preseason and the practice schedules, I think after about week 3, you figure out your strengths and your weaknesses. I look at week one now and go, you know what? Just kind of put it over there and go, if you win, you're excited. If you lose, you go, okay, is this becoming a continuing saga of the same situation? Okay, that's what you better understand, too. And if that becomes who we are after 3 weeks, okay, what we're going to do to change this thing, boys? We got to regroup, and we got to do some things a little bit different. And I think if you're the Giants, defensively, you're good. You're good as gold. You feel pretty good. Offensively, they kind of look like they did last year.
That's the fear, right?
You know, it's kind of like
without Odell. How you looked last year and then don't have Odell right now.
You knew they couldn't run the ball.
Right.
But you figured, well, maybe they can throw it. Now, look, the Dallas Cowboys are a good football team. Let's just don't take that away from
That's
the Dallas.
That's not a juggernaut defense they're playing by any stretch.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And that's the concern a little bit with the Giants.
Mike and Herman, you mentioned you give it 3 weeks. Not if you're Bill O'Brien, you don't. He is a man with a quick hook, and he appears ready to exercise it. He already pulled his starter, Tom Savage, out of his first game at halftime, and while he's not announcing a starter, all signs seem to be pointing toward the rookie Deshaun Watson tomorrow night in what sets up to be a pretty big game between two teams who got thumped in their openers with the Texans and the Bengals. What do you make of the decision, if he is indeed doing it, to go to the rookie this quickly?
That doesn't surprise me. I always felt like Savage was in pencil only as a starter and how he was going to fare this first game. Now, no one believed it was going to be this. When you look at the numbers, you go, well, you know, I was in L.A. and, you know, I was doing the Colt Ram game, and And I'm watching this thing, and I'm going, huh? Is it? What is this? No. And I turn back around, watching some more. I'm going, woo, this is not good for Houston. And by the third quarter, I'm in the booth, and I'm telling them, hey, they ought to put the rookie in. They said, Coach, they're not going to put the rookie in. I said, put him in. I said, put him in. I said, because first of all, they can't block those guys, and at least he can run around and go make some plays and try to make a play. But I just think now you have to have a quarterback with your situation in the offensive line, and they couldn't protect. You have to have a quarterback that can move. He can at least move. You can move the pocket with him. Savage, he's a drop back passer. He wants to sit in the pocket, throw the football. Well, they can't do that right now. So this was a little bit of a head scratcher, but then again, it wasn't in this sense. With all the energy that this team in Houston went through, with the. It's kind of like, okay, the emotion of the crowd and all that, and that was really good in the beginning, but then I think it was just so much energy on other things that Jacksonville went in there and got after him.
So for a guy in you who made a quarterback change on a plane, what's the discussion that Bill O'Brien's got to sit down with Savage alone, Deshaun alone, or them together? I mean, then to boot, it's a short week. So this all has to happen pretty quickly.
Well, my discussion was I called because I was sat in the back of the plane. I was sat in the last row in the back of the plane, and the coordinator sat up front, first class. I asked the stewards to just go get Hackett, bring him back here for a minute. And he comes back, and I said, hey, guess what? He looked at me, and I said, yeah, 10. Get him in. He's starting this week. And he goes, what? I said, he's starting. He said, really? I said, oh, yeah, really. Get him ready. And then I brought in Vinny and told Vinny, and I said, Vinny, hey, the way we're playing right now, I said, I could change the left tackle, change a couple guys on defense. Nobody cares. I said, but if I change the quarterback, I get everybody's attention. He says, Coach, I got it. I get you. And when I brought 10 in now, I don't know what Coach is going to do with Deshaun. I said, it's your ball. You go play now. It's your team. I said, the only way you can lead them is win. You don't have to rah-rah guy. When you win games, you can lead these guys.
What if 10 was a rookie like Deshaun is? How would you have treated that?
Chad was pretty young. Was it his second year?
Yeah, he hadn't played. And I just said, you don't have to be the rah-rah guy. You lead by winning. I said, you go win, and then they'll follow you, and I'll help you. And I think he's got to give the ball to Deshaun and say, look, I know your strengths. You've played enough in the preseason. What do you like? What do you like about this offense? And that's the conversation I'm having with the young one. You want those plays? You got it. And play that way. And the team will go, we got it, Coach. We know. And look, these guys watch this competition all preseason anyway. It wasn't it's not going to be a shock to the teams like, oh, we're going to start a rookie. They're going, hey, put the guy in the game. Let's go.
Mike Herman Edwards is here with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. For those who don't know, the 10 he's talking about is the beloved Chad Pennington. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about can what was the expression? A leopard? Who changes his stripes? What is it? What animal changes his stripes?
Yeah.
Alex Smith and Sam Bradford flinging it downfield. I mean, one of them was these are the kings of the dink and dunk, the short pass, all the safe stuff. And all of a sudden on Thursday night in a nationally televised game, you got Alex Smith flinging it all over New England. And then Monday night in a nationally televised game, you got Sam Bradford doing the same against New Orleans. Is that something you expect to see more of? Is that something that you think was dictated by what the defense was giving? Because if so, those are two teams that looked awfully good.
They did. Sam Bradford, we know, was an accurate quarterback. We didn't anticipate he was that accurate throwing the ball down the field because that's not his forte as of late. Now, all of a sudden, that's changed a little bit. And you got a coach, his OC has been with him from the beginning. He was with him when they drafted him with the Rams. He has been with him. He's in Philadelphia. So he knows he groomed Sam Bradford, basically, when he first came into pro football. So he knows his strengths, and I think did a nice job of really devising plays and formations to give him opportunities to throw the ball down the field. Not risky throws by any stretch of imagination. Hey, by the way, Diggs made a couple catches where it's like, okay, it's 50-50 ball. I'm trusting this young guy, and he goes up and catches the ball. So, are they still a little bit dink and dunk? Yeah, but he's going to take some shots. And I just think it's all orchestrated by formations and personnel.
All right, we're going to keep Herman here. Coming up next, there is it's a leopard that cannot change its spots and a tiger that cannot change its stripes.
Oh, okay.
We have these discrepancies regularly here.
We know they live in the zoo or in the jungle. You got that right?
Okay.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Steve Hurt from the Elias Sports Bureau, who's going to join us in a minute, because Golic has taken the occasion of this marvelous 20-game win streak that the Cleveland Indians are on, and he's taking it a step further. And candidly, he has a point. I'm not 100% sure which side of this debate I'm going to fall on yet, but I'm going to be a truly independent arbitrator. I'm not going to be Harold Henderson up here, just, carte blanching whatever decision it is that you make or Steve Hurt makes. I'm going to listen to the evidence on both sides, and I will eventually render a decision on whether or not the Indians can today tie the all-time record for the longest win streak in baseball history.
Yeah, to what we're talking about here, the longest win streak in modern era, according to the Elias Sports Bureau, is the 1916 New York Giants at 26-game winning streak. Now, in my book, a winning streak means you've won 26 games in a row in this particular streak. Well, in this streak, they won 12 games in a row. Then they tied. They played 9 innings of a game. It was a tie, and it was too dark to play anymore, so they called the game. And then they went on after that to win 14 more games. So first off, I say it's not a 26-game winning streak. It would be a 27-game unbeaten streak because there was a tie in there. And on the other side, the argument for Elias had been, well, they tied 3 times that year, and the ties are not put in the standings. They're basically just going to thin air, which seems somewhat amazing.
As still happens, it should be pointed out that in 2015, the Indians finished the season 81-80. They had one game that was not concluded. They didn't replay it. And so in the standings, they only have 161 games and a 162-game schedule.
So to their point, okay, I can see that. But this wasn't one of those 5 innings where they didn't reach the legal thing. This was a 9-inning game that was called, and it was a tie. 3 ties that year. So here's where you lose me. Those 3 ties that they didn't count in the standings, all those statistics, from what I've been led to believe, unless Steve Hurt is going to tell me different, count for the players as far as the year accumulating through the year. So you're having your cake and eating it too. You're not counting that in the standings, but you're letting the players have the statistics. So what gives?
Honus Wagner was in that game, by the way, and the 1916 Giants featured, among others, Heine Zimmerman, Heine Stafford, Sailor Stroud, High Pockets Kelly, Paul Parrott, and Slim Sally. They had 2 Heines for crying out loud.
Couple of Heines. So that's where you lose me. If you want to get me over to that side a little bit and say we don't count those games at all, I can start to see it. But you're counting the statistics, the stats from those 3 ties. You're letting the players have them. They count for the game. They count for the year. You lose me there. As far as I'm concerned, that should count then. It is an unbeaten streak, not a winning streak.
Let the debate begin. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Again, all of this stems from the Cleveland Indians.
They're playing great ball.
Who have won 20 straight games and have an afternoon game today in which they could make it 21. Our friend Steve Hurt from the Elias Sports Bureau is standing by, and he is ready to join us now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Good morning, Steve Hurt.
Good morning, Mike and Mike. How are you?
Good, Steve.
We're doing great. So let me set this up so there'll be no prejudicing of the jury here.
Okay.
So the Indians
please do, because although I'm a regular listener, of all the mornings not to have this show on, you have to catch me up on what's been said.
Okay.
Okay, yes, you've been a little part of the conversation today.
A little bit.
So here's what's happened. The Indians have won 20 straight games. The record, according to the Elias Sports Bureau, is 26, set by the 1916 Giants. Golic is arguing it should be 21 games set by the 1935 Cubs because there was a tie that fell in the middle of the 26-game win streak of the 1916 Giants. We read earlier your explanation of why the tie does not interfere with a win streak. For those just joining us now, can you please explain your side of that?
Okay, so tie games in baseball, what a topic. What a topic to be discussed on baseball radio in 2017.
Yeah.
But it used to be that tie games happened in baseball because there were no lights and because there weren't tarpaulins in every stadium like they have now. So when there'd be rain, sometimes the games would just have to end for the day. When tie games happened, they were always replayed. A tie game was never an acceptable ending to a baseball game, anytime, that day to this. unlike in hockey and football, now you have to go back to the pre-overtime mentality in hockey and football because both sports have since incorporated overtime periods to try to get a winner in each game. But it used to be that when we were all kids in hockey and in football, if the game ended in a tie, that was an acceptable result of the game. And when you looked in the standings in the newspaper, you'd see every team had a record that incorporated wins, losses, and ties. That was different in baseball. You never saw wins, losses, and ties in baseball standings because when there was one of these oddball tie games, it would be immediately replayed the next day usually to get a legitimate decision, a won or a loss. And, in fact, that's what happened with the 1916 Giants, which the whole incident, the tie game, occurred 101 years ago this week. So the Giants, in the second game of the doubleheader, it rained during the ninth inning. The umpire called the game off while the score was tied 1-1. So instead of playing a single game the next day, they played a doubleheader. So the Giants had to find another pitcher, so did Pittsburgh. And the Giants won the doubleheader and went on with their streak. Today, if that same thing happened, there would be a suspended game, and they would pick it up from the point of the next day. I guess it took a while to get to that point to regard those games as suspended games. But that's basically the story. And in baseball, a tie game has always been ignored in terms of winning and losing streaks. That was the case in 1916 with the Giants, and it's been the case from that day to this.
That is an excellent. So let me just say, that's an excellent explanation.
Let me just ask this question. So that game, you're telling us, because we couldn't find this anywhere, you're telling us that game that was a tie that was replayed the next day or finished the next day, and the Giants won it.
Well, it wasn't picked up at the point. It was started over from the beginning. Seems a little crazy by today's standards, I'll admit. The whole idea of a suspended game where you pick it up right from the point where it was stopped, that was not yet in vogue in 1916. They hadn't yet come to that point in human development. So,
okay. So another game was played that made up for that game
to replace the tie game.
Okay, you win.
That's it.
It's over. It's over.
He wins.
We didn't know that part of it.
We didn't.
You win.
No, we didn't. And Steve wins. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
By the way, Steve, do the statistics from that game count? Like Honus Wagner, for example, played in that game, and we haven't found the stats from that game. Do those they count?
That was an odd thing. But think of it. Think of it this time. A friend of mine was having trouble understanding the point the other day. I said, "Well, think of a pitcher who has a winning streak going. Think of a pitcher who has a winning streak going." Now he pitches in a game after he, say, won 10 straight games. Now he pitches in a game where he gets neither the win nor the loss. He gets a no decision, as I like to say now. His winning streak still continues into his next outing because there was neither a win nor a loss there to break the streak. So that at least clarified it for one friend of mine. I don't know if it'll clarify it for an entire radio audience here.
I don't think I agree with that. I don't think you can have a 9-inning 1-1 tie if you continued the game from the ninth inning and then there was that one game. But they played an entire new game. So basically you're saying a 9-inning game 1-1 tie didn't count for anything, but those statistics counted even though they replayed the game entirely. That I'm not going to lie, I don't agree with. I don't think those stats should count.
Well, that's what they did. I mean, that's a matter of historical record. That's the way they handled it. And as I say, today, you remember most famously, and there was a World Series game a couple of years ago between Philadelphia and Tampa Bay,
right,
where it was tied, and it started to rain so heavily that they couldn't play anymore that night. And they came back 2 days later and picked it up from the exact point where they did it. And they had a full house. It was the World Series, of course. And people came back to see the end of the game. I think probably the feeling back at the turn of the century when people weren't getting crowds of 40,000 at baseball game typically was if they ever picked it up the next day, who would come back to see 2 innings of baseball or something like that, so
I get that thought process. You won this battle, but I would like those statistics in that tie game 1-1 to not count. I would like to get some victory in this, so I would like you to go back and wipe out those statistics.
Steve, can you do that? Do you have that authority?
Mike, how about Mike puts out the Golick record book? In that record book, those statistics can be expunged, and then you'll have to deal with Hannes Wagner and two guys named Heine.
You know what, Steve? I would do that, but it sounds like an awful lot of work.
Oh, my goodness. But it was an excellent use of expunged. All right, Steve, that is extraordinarily well done.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for being there and for all of the help that you always give us with all of the statistical information, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Steve
Thanks,
Hurt.
Steve.
Have a great day, guys.
That's Mike and Mike.
Nothing I
That's
can
Steve
say.
Hurt. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. So, I mean, he ended the debate, and I give you credit for just acknowledging he's right. Let's get on with our day.
Even if they, the next day, continued from the ninth inning and it was a 1-1, if they finished it, it would be fine.
Well, no, but they would, if they had finished it, there would have been a result, is
That's
the
what
point.
No, that's what I'm saying. And if the Giants, exactly.
There would have been a result. So if
fine.
they had won, there never would have been a tie. The point is, the tie doesn't count.
The tie doesn't count, but my point is, if they didn't replay it, I would have the issue.
Yeah.
But they replayed that game.
If they did replay it, you'd be right.
I would be right. I would absolutely be right.
The game would end in a tie.
But that's one part of it we did not know. And I'll blame Hembo for that. And I'll throw him under the bus. We did not know they replayed that in game in its entirety, and the Giants won. Therefore, I do recognize a couple of Heinies, a Sailor, a Slim, and a High Pockets.
High Pockets Kelly, who, by the way, is in the Hall of Fame.
Well, there you go.
Willie sent me a note. High Pockets Kelly is in the Hall of Fame.
And all their teammates as having the best win streak in baseball.
Yeah, a history. Well, but you got 6 games to catch him.
No, I know.
I mean, the Indians are going to be right there.
My point is, I am saying I accept what Steve had to say, and I accept the statistic as it is.
All right, that was very well done on his part. We are Mike and Mike. Let me give you one quick thing on that, and then we'll do next question, because I can't even imagine if I was on a team that won 20 consecutive games, and I've never, I don't even know what I would compare that to in my life. If I were to play golf and break 80 20 consecutive times, which I've done in my life 5 times. So, I mean, it would be quite a remarkable streak. I can't imagine the level of superstition that I would rise to and all the things I'd be doing the same way and all the things I'd be thinking about. So Terry Francona, after last night's win, was asked about that, about any superstitions he has going with 20 consecutive wins.
I got one really good buddy, one of my best friends, but he's notoriously bad luck. Everybody kind of refers to him as like the gray cloud. He knows who he is. And that's, you talk about superstitions. I will not talk to him. He is a text only. Oh, yeah, he knows. Cost me one job. He's not getting away again.
That's awesome. That is an awesome story. I love that. And I never had a streak when I was playing that I did a lot of the same things anyway, but that was just kind of out of habit. I didn't feel, if I didn't, oh, my God, I'm not going to have a good game. But I never had a streak to say, I have to do the same thing over and over again. But I was part of a streak. When I lived in Arizona and the kids were very, very young, we're talking 7 years old, 8 years old in that area there.
Yeah.
They, along with Jeff Fiegel's son CJ, was on the team as well, and others. That we had a basketball team that we coached. They were called the Pulverizers. And we went undefeated that year.
Okay.
Won the championship, 12-0. And, so you ask if you do the same thing. I remember specifically before that season started in the first game, the wife and I. So we won, and I said, hey,
how'd that work?
Well, 12 games later.
Did she buy that?
No, not at all.
I was going to say.
No, not one bit.
Does that work?
I tried. I said, hey, hon, remember when?
That's a really creative way of going about that. All right, Mike and Mike, congratulations, all kidding aside, to the Indians. It's an incredible streak. They've outscored their opponents over the 20 wins 102-0.
It is.
They haven't lost a game since August 23rd.
And I think another one is about jumping on a team early in the first 3 innings of these games. They've outscored their opponents 64-12. So they're just jumping all over these teams.
All right, let's do next question here, and the first one involves the Indian. Next question brought to you by Indeed.com. Post your next job opening on the world's #1 job site. First question, which streak is more significant, the Indians' 20-game winning streak or the Dodgers' 11-game losing streak, which, by the way, they snapped last night?
I think I looked toward the Dodgers because they were so dominant for most of the season that, and you just thought they were going to cruise their way to the World Series, and they may, hit a valley here and there, a peak and a valley, but Did you expect an 11-game losing streak, Valley? I know I didn't. So while a 20-game win streak is fantastic, and I think they're going to keep going, given the season the Dodgers have had of winning so much and being so dominant, to then flip the script that badly and lose that many games in a row, it was pretty amazing to me.
I'm going to go the other way because in terms of actual significance, the Indians, with their win streak, have taken over the number 1 seed in the American League. The Dodgers, with their losing streak, did not lose the number 1 seed in the National League. It could actually be more consequential to the Indians. Who would you say there's more pressure on now to win the whole thing this year? The Indians because of their 20-game win streak, or the Dodgers?
For the season the Dodgers have had, I know they hit, obviously, this big-time hiccup here, but I still think on the Dodgers.
Well, the Indians are not that far behind them.
It's on the Dodgers. Move on.
The Dodgers?
The Dodgers. It's on the Dodgers.
Okay,
they have the
enough.
pressure. Quit putting pressure on Cleveland.
Next question.
Thank you.
The bigger problem in the NFL right now, is it quarterback play or offensive line
play? So many things happen. Quarterback touches the ball every play, so you have to look at what they do. But they're protected by the O-line. If you want to have a better passing game, it's good to have a great running game or a good running game. You need an offensive line for that. So the offensive line play, because a lot of this stems from college systems to the NFL, the preparedness of quarterbacks to offensive line play. In a quarterback, you have one person, and you try and have them grow as a quarterback. And for the offensive line, there is no other position where multiple human beings have to work in unison more than the offensive line. And if one guy is off, that could wreak havoc. So I think the offensive line has been very, very spotty, and you see the biggest difference on good offensive line of just how much that's going to help a team. So I'd lean there.
And I think that the struggles at both positions stem from the same thing, which is the difference in the style and the way the game is being played in college versus the pros. I think the quarterbacks actually are in a more advantageous position because they can hand the ball off no matter what.
Yeah.
The offensive linemen, if they're not accustomed to getting down in that stance and blocking the way they need to in the NFL, how do you even project these guys to the pros?
Very, very tough.
That's why you wind up with these number 1 picks who can't play.
Yeah, it's very difficult. That's why, there's not looking at stats, for statistical position, but for O-line, you really got to hone in on how much they're in their stance, what kind of step do they have, how are their fundamentals that can translate off to the next level.
To me, that is the bigger problem and the more lasting one in the NFL. Next question. Of the teams that currently have sole possession of first place in their division, and there are only 3, the Bills, the Jaguars, and the Rams, which is the likeliest to make the playoffs?
You sit there and look at Jacksonville in that division, and you say, you want to kind of hide the quarterback, you want to have a good running game, and you want to win on defense. Well, that's kind of Houston right now, right? You don't want to put too much on Deshaun Watson's shoulders. I think he'll be the starter. You don't want to put a lot on him.
Right.
You want to be able to run the ball. The O-line has some issues there, and you're relying on a great defense, but you didn't see it in the first game. You saw it with Jacksonville. The Rams, you're dealing with Seattle out there. Cardinals just lost David Johnson. That really, really hurts them. The Bills, I don't know. I just don't see it yet. I'm actually going to lean toward Jacksonville.
I would lean toward the Rams. I think the Rams are the team of this group that has the best chance to make the playoffs. The Bills, I think, are not. The Bills played the Jets. I get that the Rams played the Colts, but the Rams annihilated the Colts. The Bills and the Jets, the Jets coached their way out of a chance to win that game. I think the Rams, with improved quarterback play, they played without Aaron Donald, their best players coming back. I'm not saying I think they will make the playoffs, but of these 3, I would pick them. Next question. Lonzo Ball being ranked ahead of Carmelo Anthony in ESPN.com's rankings is blank.
I always have a problem. This, again, I've had my issues in talking about LeVar from the talking standpoint, not starting his own business and all that, but the talking standpoint has nothing to do with the kid. He looks, to me, his vision of the court and the way he moves the ball and gets teammates involved is fantastic. But I have a problem with ranking players who have never touched the field yet, touched the hard court, touched the ice, touched anything, to rank them in there. So I have an overall fundamental problem with these kind of rankings anyway. That's not to say that at this point, listen, Carmelo's coming to the end of his career. I mean, he just is. And Lonzo is just starting his career on what looks to be a promising career, but it's still got the P word on it more than anything else, and that's potential. So overall, I have a problem with people who haven't even stepped on their particular field yet being in these rankings.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you were drafting right now, you would take Lonzo Ball ahead of Carmelo Anthony in the big picture because he's at the very beginning and Carmelo is closer to the end.
Right.
Do I think Lonzo Ball will be a more effective NBA player in this coming season than Carmelo? I don't think it's ridiculous.
Oh, I don't think it's ridiculous either. No, I don't either. So from the ranking standpoint, I get it. I can see him being ranked ahead of Carmelo. I'm just not a fan of
64 feels awfully low, though, for Carmelo.
I mean,
very, very low.
First time skydiving? Sure is. Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump. Oh, wait. Should we be like in tandem? Tandem? That's a great idea. Are you a certified instructor? No, but I love parachutes and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CF